Okay, so it is absolutely wonderful to have everybody here to join us for our second IANDS Auckland meeting. And I'm loving that the conversation is growing. I'm loving that people are really interested to discuss both death, but near-death experiences and spiritual experiences more than we have been. So that's great. Adele, welcome. We can see you joining us. So as Adele jumps in, she gets her sound set up, I'll just introduce our speaker, who is someone who I've gotten to know quite well recently and have really enjoyed that. So today we are joined by Janet Tarantino. And Janet had a mystical experience when she was suffocated to death due to an allergy. It's got to be so rough, Janet. Her experience was both powerful and enlightening, and she saw God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, and a guardian angel. She saw many spiritual beings, actually, which I'm sure she's going to talk about in her chat today. Not only that, Janet was shown moments of her life that hadn't happened yet, and she was told to remember them as they mattered. She's the author of her brand new book, Dying to See, Revelations about God, Jesus, Our Pathways, and Nature of the Soul. So today's going to be really exciting. Janet Tarantino, thank you for joining us, and welcome to IANDS Auckland.
No, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. I just enjoy these events, and this is my favorite subject. Now that I've understood it, I know it's exciting. Really, I didn't expect that one day that my view of life, death, and consciousness would explode, but it did, and I've had several events throughout my life that were unusual, and I'm sure maybe some of you have had those kind of events too and just haven't put them in their places yet. For example, when I was 4, I was bored because I was home with my mom and dad, with my mom. My dad was working at the time, and all the rest of the kids were in school. I wasn't old enough to go to kindergarten yet. So that was before the television came out. So we had to occupy ourselves at home. And so I was listening to my mom's conversation, and she was on the phone talking to a friend about adoption. Well, that got me to thinking, am I adopted? And so when she got off the phone, I asked her, am I adopted? And she said, no, silly, you're our little girl. And the next thing that came out of my mouth is what makes me pause, or makes me remember that moment, because I said, okay, but I'm going to die young. And I don't know why I said that, but I said it. And my mom's, her expression changed. She was appalled, she said, quit talking like that. And as I stood there, I thought about what young men, and I had visions of different ages going through my mind, and I didn't realize I was seeing my own book of life, because those were the moments that were to happen in the future, where I had my 3 near-death experiences. Well, I'd never heard of near-death experiences until I was way older. Anyway, so I pocketed that, never thought much about it. And then when I was 15, I also had another unusual experience where I got sick with, I'm not sure if it was the flu or E. coli, because we had went picnicking at a park. And so I don't know, it was an all-day affair and it was hot, so I don't know if there was E. coli. And E. coli was found in the water there that particular day. So who knows what it was, but I was sick for an extended length of time, not like an ordinary flu. And so my mom had put my sister in with my dad, and so she could sleep in with me and take care of me. Well, one night, I remember looking up at the ceiling, and all of a sudden the ceiling turned to clouds. And previous to this, I had worked and had saved up my money for getting school clothes. I wanted to start my senior year, because this was just previous to the senior year, and I was looking forward to going to orientation day. I don't know if you guys have an orientation where you're at, okay, so where you can get used to the school and get your get everything that you need. Well, I was looking forward to that. And of course, high school was the big time, and that was the dating age, and dances and football and basketball. I was really excited about that time frame of my life. So when I got sick, I was very disappointed I didn't get to go to that. But when this ceiling turned to clouds, there was 2 openings that also opened up in the clouds. One over here on the left and one over here on the right. And on the left, I could see in the opening there, far off in the distance, I could see get this, a sumo wrestler. Now,
Wow.
who would think you'd see a sumo wrestler? But he was dressed in white, in a white room, at a white table, surrounded by white light, and he had his hair in a top knot. And all he did was look at me. Just look at me. And then in the other hole, I see a beautiful, beautiful lady come floating in, and it was like she was riding on music, because the music that accompanied her was so glorious. And I thought of her at that time, because you can only, like PMH Atwater says, you can only describe things with the knowledge you have at the time. So I thought of her as the music box lady, or Daddy's little girl, because there was a point in time that where she moved up and away, because when she initially came, she was facing me, but I was too interested in her dress, because I was, I had been looking for fashion, I was really excited about that dress, because it was all white, laces, rows and rows of laces, and she was so beautiful. She had dark hair down to her, halfway down her back, and it was really thick, and by then she was facing the sumo wrestler. So they were in some kind of conversation, but I wasn't allowed to listen to it. So anyway, I did look at her dress, and I was flowing through her dress, because had gotten so minuscule, the lace eyelets on her dress became caverns, and I could feel my energetic hair blowing back like I was a downhill skier, and I was weaving in and out of these eyelets, because as I went around the dress, and then I came back to where I was. Then she had moved up and away, and I thought that she was Daddy was putting her up on a pedestal. And anyway, then she came back, talked to the sumo wrestler again, and then all of a sudden they changed into orbs of light, radiating orbs of light, and they flew through me or behind me, I'm not sure, and they bounced behind me. I could see them, even though I didn't have to move. I could see them behind me bouncing around, and then they went through the wall and around the house, and I could see them like I had x-ray vision, and they were in the side window, because I was on a corner room, and so there was a window behind the headboard and then a side window, and they were now on the side window, and I could see that these orbs, watching me, and then they'd turn to talk, and then they'd watch again, and then one would zoom off down the side of the house, and the other one stayed. So this must have been the watcher, the sumo wrestler, that was the watcher. And then the other one that zoomed off down came back, and you could see them talking again, and then they both left. And I didn't want them to go, because I felt like they were friends. But then all of a sudden I settled back down into my body, and then got sick, because I was back in the earthly realm. You know how that goes. But I didn't realize till, gosh, many years. Actually, I was at the 2017 IANDS conference, and I had a poster presentation there. And in my presentation at that conference, you could see the sumo wrestler and you could see the lady, but I hadn't seen the picture of that made the connection to who that was, because it wasn't until later in life when I went by my mom and dad's. I was at my mom and dad's, and I had walked through their living room and kitchen. How many times, and you just ignore things that are around you, But one, as God does, creator of the universe, whatever you want to call it. For me, it's God. Or it's actually all of them for me, but I term it as God. It's easiest. This picture caught my eye. And I looked at the picture and I knew who it was because it was my daughter. But that picture was taken by a friend and I didn't have it. And it was in the pose that was like my daughter, was like the girl in the music box lady. And when I saw that, it was like explosions, confetti, that's the music box lady. Because Denise, was it similar? It was amazing how close it was.
Yeah.
I have no doubt that was my daughter when I was 15 telling me to get back in my body because she wanted to be born in the future. So we make agreements on the other side to play parts in certain people's lifetimes. And so I settled back in my body, and 15 years later, by that time I had gotten married, and I was conceived and bore a little girl. I had 2 boys, but then I had this little girl, who eventually was the person that I had, was the music box lady. And so I thought that was, and I hadn't discovered it at the 2017 convention yet. It happened shortly after that because I had drawn the picture for the book. So that's the first indication. Well, actually not the first indication. Seeing those moments flash before my eyes is the first indication that moments are planned in our life. That doesn't necessarily mean we're puppets or we're set in this direction, because every choice we make can put us in a different direction. Although those lessons are predetermined to happen, but they may be more difficult in one direction versus another. So if we learn to listen to the guidance that we have, it'll take us on the best pathway. And actually that's in the Bible too. It says, I will guide you along the best pathway. It doesn't say the only pathway. So I think this is amazing. I quote some of these scriptural points, not that I'm a religious buff, because I didn't read the Bible until after all this happened, this third near-death experience I'm going to tell you about, because after that happened, I thought I better read scripture, because I met Jesus, I met God, I saw the Holy Spirit, I saw angels, and wow, what's going on? So I better, maybe I should, and I saw so many things in the Bible that were actually in my experience, for me. So mine was a Christian-based NDE, although it doesn't have to be Christian-based, because all these things apply to the spiritual aspects of it too. But after that happened, well, actually, I was in a car accident too. That was the catalyst of all this, because I had tucked away at 15, and then I was in a car accident, and was saved in that car accident. I was saved by something I couldn't see, but I could feel. And when I went to look at my car later that day, the guy was amazed that I was still alive. And I got direction. I was the only one in the car. And I got direction from a voice that came from nowhere that it told me to lay down across the seat and cover my face. And I didn't have any broken bones. I had muscle trauma, to say the least. And I knew that was another thing. Something saved me. And I couldn't deny all this stuff was going on. But what do? You can't tell anybody. They'll think you're crazy. You know what I mean? So I kept everything to myself. And then a darker part of my life happened where I think this was caused by the car accident. I think because in my third near-death experience, this darker portion of my life, it's not darker, it's not bad or anything, it's just something was going on with my body that I didn't understand. I was slapping myself. I was getting electrical strikes and I was slapping myself because I was getting electrical strikes. And you know how a mosquito bites you and you automatically slap it? Well, that's what these things would feel like, only this mosquito it was like the size of a parakeet, and it was just zap, zap, you know? And I was whoa. You know how odd that is when you're in a meeting and you're sitting in a meeting next to the plant manager and you're talking about product supplies, and then all of a sudden, you know, and then all of a sudden you hit yourself again, and finally he turns around and looks at you and says, "Are you okay?" And I, what can I say? Because it's not something I had control over. And so it was a miserable part of my life. And I started stuttering too. I couldn't get words out. I couldn't connect words. I could see what I wanted to say with a picture, but I couldn't get the word that was associated with that picture. And I still have a little bit of a problem with that at some points, but I've overcome that quite well. But that led me to go to a Miracle Crusade. Have you guys ever heard of Miracle Crusades? Well, I didn't know what it was either. But my husband had a cousin he hadn't seen for many, many years. I'd never met the man. And he had called one day and said, I'm coming to Denver for a Miracle Crusade. He was on the music staff for Benny Hinn Ministries, and Benny Hinn is like us, people that have spiritual experiences. He had a spiritual experience when he was young, and the Holy Spirit took him up and told him that he had to become a preacher, but he couldn't speak. He was stuttered. He said, "How can I do that? Because of my stutter." And then it was persistent. So finally, when he got up behind the pulpit, he could speak perfectly. And he found that he could heal people. It was like he could throw energy around, and it wasn't that he was healing. Jesus would heal through him, and the Holy Spirit would do the work. For Benny, Jesus is the healer, and the Holy Spirit is the healer, the energetic force that does the healing. That's how he explained it. Just like many of us get different gifts, some get the gift of healing. Well, he got the gift of healing. Well, anyway, that's who was there. And I didn't know anything about this. But anyway, I went because I wanted to meet his cousin, and which we did. He's a very nice man. And so during the sermon of Benny Hinn, he was a very powerful speaker. And they sang songs like, Jesus, you're the savior of my soul. Breathe upon me, breath of God. He touched me. And this was significant to my third near-death experience because of how he created it. The universe created it based on those prayers, because you can pray for what you want. I thought I was praying for physical healing, but when you're praying along with those songs, you're praying with the words of the songs, and the words were, Jesus, you're the healer of my soul. And so that was the healing that I was actually praying for, even though I didn't know it. Although while I was there, he did touch me and did heal a little bit of my cognitive problems. And I could start doing math after that, which I couldn't do before. Everything was erased before. He was structuring me as a person, which I didn't realize at the time. That's a very tough thing to go through. And, you know, many of you people fall into depressions and stuff, and they're because sometimes they don't know why, or because they want to, you know, they want to go back. This, I believe some of that really is the restructuring of this person, because it takes years for all of this stuff to happen, to manifest totally the way it's supposed to. And he's building you to be a better person. Well, anyway, then I was out at the ranch. I owned a 75-acre ranch. We had bought it and moved away from the city, and when we had the starlight skies. And we had lived there for many years, and all of a sudden I started developing an allergy. And it was clogging my chest and my sinuses. And I thought it was a seasonal allergy that was going to go away, you know, as seasonal allergies do. I've heard of those. Or it was the cats, because when you live on a ranch, you have a lot of cats because they keep the rodents away, and they're just adorable. You know, you want to pet them and cuddle them. Well, I went in the house and would take a decongestant pill to clean up my sinuses for the evening. And then think about that thing. Anyway, I didn't realize that the allergy was in the house. It wasn't out of the house. I thought it was being caused by what was out of the house, and it was just developing over the daytime. And when I went in, it just, you know, the culmination of the allergy was starting to cut off my breathing. Well, I went to bed and propped 3 pillows up on top of each other so that I'd be at a 45-degree angle. And I always sleep on my back with my hands over my tummy. And I fell asleep. My husband was beside me. And in the middle of the night, I don't know when, I could feel a tightening in my chest, and it felt really tight. And I didn't have the strength to get up to get help. So I reached for my husband with my left arm, and I said, I was trying to get his attention to help me, but I couldn't feel him. So I yelled at him and I said, Gavin, help me, please help me. And he didn't respond. So then all of a sudden I popped out of my body, found myself at the ceiling looking down. But while I was up there, I was now floating in this most magnificent peace, love, and tranquility that, you know, people just can't imagine here on this earth. And how many of you guys are near-death experiencers? Yeah, you'll probably understand that, don't you? I mean, you feel that tranquility, peace, and unconditional love. And I was surrounded by that, and it was a velvety blackness, and but it was the middle of the night, so that made perfect sense that it was a velvety blackness. But really, I think I was inside the tunnel, the blackness of the tunnel, and but I was happy. I felt free. I felt like I had just taken a breath of fresh air. I felt like I had like a balloon that had been blown to capacity, and all of a sudden it had broken and released me into the atmosphere. I felt absolutely magnificent. As I floated there, I saw my body down below, and my hands were still over my tummy. So it wasn't my physical arms that was reaching for my husband. So it was probably not my physical voice calling for him either. It was my spirit voice. And that's why he didn't hear. I was interested in my body, and I wanted to see it. So I zoomed down to see it. I looked at different perspectives. I remember specifically being by my nose. I was looking at my face, And I remember thinking, wow, that needs more makeup. So the rest of my life up to this day, I put on my makeup every morning. No matter if I'm going anywhere or anything, because I want to look the best I can be, just for me. So every morning now, when I put my makeup on, I put extra makeup on my nose to make sure that those pores are filled in because of that instance. That's how profound that was to me. And then I returned to the ceiling. I saw a pin of light coming off in the distance, but I wasn't concerned about it because while I was up there, I realized I was dead, of course. And I was so happy I had my memories of who I was. And I could feel my energetic arms floating out to the sides and kind of in the back. And they were just floating free and elongated. And I wasn't concerned about that. But then I saw suddenly a silver cord float by in front of me. It was going from left to right, weightlessly. And I didn't know what that was about. And I was amazed to find that in the Bible. And that's in Ecclesiastic. It's also in, what do they call that? Astral projection research, people talk about that. And in the Bible, it says, in Ecclesiastics, it says, remember your Creator now while you are young, before the silver cord of life snaps and the golden bowl is broken. Don't wait until the water jar is smashed at the spring and the pulley is broken, because you will come home to God who gave it. I was astounded to find that in the Bible. And also, while I was hovering there, I noticed the pin of light from there, but there was also a pin of light coming off from the left. But I noticed that there was something going on with my physical body below. And that interested me because, you want to, where the activity is, these pins of light were slow. But there was something happening with my body. I could see out of my physical legs below a blue, translucent, shimmering essence raising out of the feet, the ankles, the chins, and then up to the thighs. And then as it released, I could feel it pulling up toward me. That was when I knew that I was my spiritual body that had already left the upper part of my body, and now I was watching my spiritual body leave the lower half, because sometimes it has to work its way out. I mean, my upper part popped out and my lower part was kind of, let's get with the program here. But it was like I was a fisherman pulling up this energy toward me. And then I knew that this was my personal sliver of the Holy Spirit, of God, of Jesus, of God's Spirit. So each one of us have, our spirit is our portion of God's Spirit, from my NDE understanding. So I knew from then on that God is with us through His Spirit. We have this spirit inhabiting our body, and it is the guide that takes us through life. And it sees out of these eyes. These eyes are the portholes. So when we're reading a book, it's reading a book. God's experiencing life with us. And that's why it says in the Bible, so much as you do to somebody else, you do to God, because He's everywhere. I thought that was magnificent. Let's see, where was I? With the spirit leaving the body. And then this pin of, I was floating there. As it came up to me, I transformed. I was no longer in this blue essence. I transformed because my vision was like I was looking through a fish bowl. And as it transformed, it was kind of cockeyed, but then all of a sudden it became crystal clear again. And I was sitting in a wand. I was sitting in a wand made of love, like little kids use to blow bubbles. So I was now an orb shape sitting in a wand. And this is where God was showing me that he created this NDE to match what I prayed for in those prayers that day, because one of the songs that I sang was breathe upon me, breath of God. So what better way to have me realize this than have me in the shape of an orb sitting in a wand that, you know, he may have blown me from. I mean, that's not exactly what he did, but it's a metaphorical likeness. And I was, you know, I thought this was awesome. Of course, I didn't put all this together immediately. It was when I wrote my book, I realized, oh, wow, he created this NDE specifically because of my prayers. And we all have the same spiritual body within us. Then this pin of light from over here flew into the room, because as it, you know, it's like an airplane coming closer, it gets faster as it gets close, but it whipped into the room and it grew up into a spiritual being. And it had a gown of white tied at the waist with a rope, and had sleeves hanging off of its wrist, and I could see its hair down to here, and it was one of the couple of the strands were blowing in the breeze across his face. But the light was so bright around him because he is infused with light, and he had light radiating out of his light center. And so I couldn't see his face very clearly because of the light. I don't think I was supposed to at that point. Later, I find out that this was Jesus. And he had his arms open wide in a welcoming gesture, and he loved me. He knew everything about me, and he loved me. And I was in awe. I couldn't say anything. But then he reached out his hand and he said, "It's time to go home, Jan." Well, my first thought was of my daughter, because we're very close and she's more dependent on me than my two sons. So he answered my thought with, "She'll be okay." And so I was going to go. Who would not want to go, you know, with surrounded in this magnificent love that you're surrounded in. But this other pin of light that was coming from the left had come in too, and it had grown and grown and grown and grown, and it became a beautiful light energy. It kind of looked like a tunnel because of the bubbling clouds around it. And it radiated white light, but I could feel the colors in it. Even though it was white light, I could feel the colors in it. And it was God in its energetic essence. You know, it's the light that comes through the darkness, you know. And it was as big as Jesus was. And I was floating toward it. I was gently floating toward this tunnel, and then Jesus put his hand toward the tunnel to welcome me to the tunnel. Well, God, who is the energy force there, had other plans for me, and he reached out his rainbow arms and he hugged me. And while he hugged me, he showed me moments of my life. Some have already happened, and those I've mentioned to you. Some that I haven't had, you know, I can't cover everything in this. So a lot of the points in my life, he showed me. But then there were some I didn't recognize because they hadn't happened yet. And he told me to understand these moments, they matter. Well, sure. But I wanted to understand them in heaven. You know, I wanted to go to heaven. I was still, you know, I was still wanting to go. So then they showed me the future. Then I turned back into an energetic body, and I felt angels at my elbows, and they raised me up in the air. I could see the light radiating from around me, the white and gold rays that were being emanated from these energetic angels. And they took me up into the air. And I saw off in the distance two pins of light coming up the road, and I saw my body and my husband below, and they were really small, and my focus then became on those two pins of light. But those two pins of light were not energetic beings, but was a vehicle that was coming to save me. It was an ambulance. But at that moment, even though I was way up in the sky, and that ambulance was pins of light off in the distance, I could feel the bumps in the road like I was riding in that vehicle. I could hear the crunch of the tires like my ear was right next to the tire itself. I had all perspectives because I could see myself and the husband. I could see the countryside and the ranches around me. I had all perspectives at the same time. That tells me that our spiritual body, which is God's spirit, can be in all places at all times too, because we are, divine beings. And it turned up our road because we lived on a ranch. We had a 1/4 mile road to our house, and we had trees on the north that blocked the north wind. And I could feel the bumps of the road there, and they went in to save me, and I was not going to make it. We were so far out in the country. I mean, if I suffocated to death, there's, no way that somebody could get there in time to actually save me, I believe. It was just a small town that was close by, and it was volunteer firemen, and no ambulance close by. Had to go down. It was a different town. Then I was okay with dying. Then all of a sudden I was back down before the light of God again, just on the precipice of going in. I really wanted to go in, but they showed me one more image. The image they showed me was my son, my middle son, Kurt. And when I saw Kurt's picture, I knew I couldn't go. I knew something was going to happen to him. And if I wasn't here to help him, his life would go down a more difficult pathway. So I told Jesus I was ready. I was not ready to go yet. And I knew he smiled, even though I couldn't see his face. I knew he smiled, and he nodded his head. And then I turned back into that blue spirit body that came out of my physical body, and I sat down in my body. I put my butt in her butt, and I slipped a foot in each one of her feet, and I grabbed my spirit knees, and I racked back and forth to get up the momentum to snap back into her body and help her sit up for air. But as I was doing this, I kept hearing a message from heaven. And that message from heaven was, love is the only thing that matters. And it kept echoing, love is the only thing that matters. Love is the only thing that matters. Love is the only thing that matters. So I snapped back in her body. I helped her get up, sit up, and gasp for air. And then I knew I had to live my life wondering when that shoe was going to drop for my son. That's another thing that showed me that our life is pre-planned, and that was on my pathway. And if I didn't stay, my agreement to help him in that time frame would not be good. So I stayed to help him. Well, all this shows me that we all work together. But this isn't the only thing that, you're not done with your spiritual experiences when you have an NDE. Because when you have an NDE, they don't necessarily leave you alone. So years later, I found myself my spiritual body pulled up to heaven yet again. But this time, this was one of the things I was shown. One of the images I was shown. I was shown a panel of men in white robes, in a white how do you explain it, fogginess. And there was some were sitting at a table, some were not. Well, this was a panel of beings that I found myself in front of. And I knew them. They were people I knew. They wanted to know what I learned about judgment. Well, throughout my life, I learned some things about judgment. And what they had showed me during this experience was that they had, I came to realize that my boyfriend, Bob, who I had met coincidentally on the internet from across the world, he lives in Austria, and he wanted to learn English. So he asked me if I would practice English with him. So we wrote back and forth, and we worked on his English. And over time he got better, and then we chatted on instant messenger, and then eventually he called. He was such a nice guy. And anyway, we came to know each other, we fell in love, and he took me to parts of the world where I learned I had misjudged some people from my childhood, because of one of them was because of the clothing he wore. My next door neighbor was a great man, and his daughter was my best friend. We played a lot together throughout our childhood. But during the hot summers, her dad wore a Speedo swimsuit. Well, I thought that was appalling, because my dad wore shorts down to his knees. And you base things off of what goes on in your life, not realizing that America is a land of immigrants. Everybody came from Europe or someplace. So there's a lot of different cultures there in our life, and it's growing more and more, as we know. But I had judged him, and I realized when Bob took me over to Europe and I saw all the people swimming in Speedo type swimming suits, and actually Bob himself, he trained for the Olympics in diving. Didn't make it, but he trained it for it. And everybody wore Speedo swimming suits. And when he came to Colorado, he wanted to know about swimming. And I said, well, the lakes are pretty cold here, but we can try it. And I said, and when I realized he had a Speedo, he said, what type of swimsuits do you wear? I said, we wear the shorts down to the knees. And he says, well, why would anybody want to swim with that much dragging around them? That slows down the speed, I didn't think of that, and realized that I had, that it all came to make me realize I had misjudged, because that man was nothing but a good man. Another person I judged was my grandfather, simply by hearing somebody say he was an alcoholic. I took that as true. But when we went over there, and he was in World War II, and over in Europe, you see movies of people, sharing their camaraderie at a bar during their break times. And in Europe, they do have beer fests, and they do have wine fests, and because that's wine country over there and beer country. And so there's high tables all over the place where you can stop and share, conversation with strangers and just have a drink. And my grandfather came from Norway. So then I got to thinking, was this the way his parents, shared their social time? Was this something he was emulating? Because there was a time in this time frame that everybody thought he was an alcoholic. His marriage was falling apart. My grandmother had found and fallen in love with another man, while my grandfather was supposedly, either he was in the bars or was he in the bars because his marriage was falling apart. I didn't know. But how can an alcoholic, per se, all of a sudden stop drinking and become a bartender? It didn't make sense. So how can somebody actually be, stop and become a good bartender if he was an alcoholic? So I realized that I may have misjudged him. Or was he drinking because he had post-traumatic stress disorder and was trying to drown his problems? Who was I? Who was I to judge him that way when I didn't know everything that made him the person that he was? And that's what I was being shown, that I shouldn't judge these people because I don't know what their life is. I don't know what made them. And they were happy with me that I had already learned this. And they were nodding their heads and they were kind of chuckling, and I was too. And then it was time to go back to my physical body. But as I went back to my physical body and I was chuckling, and I said to them, that was so cleverly laid out for me to learn. So our moments of our life are planned before we come to this world. Bob was brought into my life not only to love me, but to take me on this, to be parts of my special lesson plan. Now, how can we learn what our lessons are? That's the question. And so if anybody wants to learn what their lessons are, do what I did. Make your own book of life. Write down those moments that you remember in your lifetime and make sure they're in the right sequence, and then find out all the details about them. And you may find that also deja vu moments, because deja vu moments are moments where you felt like you've done this before or you've been here before. Those are guideposts, knowing that we're in the right place at the right time for what we have planned. Because I did find out what was going to happen with Kurt, and I had a deja vu moment in that location. So, and I knew that I was supposed to be there at that time. So yes, write down these moments, create your own book of life, and then is this moment guiding? Did this take you in the right? Your decision here take you in the right direction? Was it worse for you, or was it better for you, or did you come across a person that you were supposed to help, or was there a person there that helped you in some way? Because we work together. It's like a ship. It's like a ship going through life, and it takes a crew to get there. And you may meet people along the way, and you help them, like you give them some food or something. But anyway, our life is an exciting journey. If you wake up every morning and think about, okay, what's going to happen today? What's in the plan here? Let me, am I supposed to learn something today? What golden nugget can I pick up? Or what is this person for? Am I supposed to help them? Or are they supposed to help me? It's kind of like a puzzle, an exciting puzzle, really, if you think about it. So that's my view of my ND. Of course, there's so much more. I just don't have time to tell you, but I wanted to give you guys something that would, might help you too, that would be beneficial. So, and there more details will be in my book of all these things. So I'd love to take questions.
Do you have a copy of your book there, Janet, that you can hold up?
Oh yeah, just now let me grab it.
Okay, just so people can see the cover so you can recognize it. Man, how good was that? So interesting. You're all on mute, by the way. You can come off mute. We can be interactive. Look at that beautiful cover. It's amazing. So
I have to tell you, I read her book in a night and a half.
You couldn't put it down?
I would go to work. I would come home. I'm making dinner. Until it was bedtime. And I'd lay in bed and I would think, I could do another half hour. And when I finished it, Janet, I have to tell you, I have never been more moved by the things that you said, because I could relate to some of what you said. I do have a question for you. You said that in the book, everything's planned before I got here. And you had said about if we go to Like if we hit that crossroad and we choose the left instead of what God wanted on the right, there is an answer on both sides, correct?
There's an answer on both sides.
The right one.
Yeah, well, it's just, it might be more difficult on the other
Right.
way. Maybe you'll run into more difficulties, more rocks in the road per se. More it might be like my NDE might have manifested in a worse way. So maybe I would have been in a, paralyzed in a hospital or something.
Yeah.
Versus just walking away.
I think those wrong roads are those divorces. Learn.
I think even divorces are planned.
Learning.
Well, because my first husband and I separated ways over 30 years ago, and we still remain friends to this day. His priority is work, and I was left alone too much, and so I decided that wasn't for me. He understood, and so we're still extended family members. He joins us for holidays, etc. And as you know, he lives with me. Actually, this is weird. It's weird and it's not weird because we've been divorced for 30 years. And I recently took care of my mom and dad for 5 years while they were in their dying process. And as it turned out, when I said a prayer to God, and I said, please let me know if this is the time that I'm supposed to go, because I just felt the tugging that I was supposed to go. The next morning I woke up and I knew I was supposed to go. I said, show me somehow that I'm supposed to go. So I called my daughter that day, and I was in Austria at the moment, and I said, I think it's time for me to go, and I'll have to find somebody to rent my home. And she said, oh, Dad's looking for a place to rent right now. And so she called her dad, and he wanted to rent my house. So and he told me, don't move anything, just leave it there. I'll move in and take care of your house. So this was perfect for both of us, because he had, previous to that, wanted to go travel the world. So he sold everything he had and bought a big trailer. Well, the trailer ended up being too much for him to handle. And then business picked up, and his partners wanted him to stay. So he didn't have all of the housewares and stuff. So I said, just use everything that I have. And so it worked out. He stayed there, and I moved to Boise. And so I've recently come back, and I travel a lot because Bob's over in Austria. I go over there for 3-month segments, and then I come back and over there back. And so I said, you can stay here if you like, and you can take care of my house while I'm gone. And he works. I don't see him when I wake up in the morning, and I'm in bed before he comes home. So it's not like, there's an interaction there. It doesn't matter. We're friends. Where was I going with that? Anyway.
Gosh. Yeah, it was about moments. The divorces can be some of the
because in that third NDE, I think that allergy, which happened to be caused by scented plugins. I had those all around the house and in my bedroom, right next to my bed, and that's why the allergy was worse in the house. And it took so long to get into an allergist. I had to wear masks in my house, the paint masks.
Oh, wow.
And because I didn't know how to protect myself. I did not want that to happen again. Because I had not heard of NDEs yet. I knew I had to live wondering when things were going to happen, something was going to happen with Kurt, and I wasn't ready to die. But now, after years of studying these moments and realizing that allergy and this NDE were catalyst to get me out of there, because that second husband had issues from childhood, and wouldn't get help with them. And although he was a wonderful person most of the time, he did not know how to handle his frustrations at work. So when he was frustrated with something at work, he would come home, and then pretty soon I was in trouble for doing something that I didn't know I had done. And he wasn't a physical, but he would yell at me and tell me I didn't support him. And so it was always my fault when I knew it wasn't my fault. And one day I asked him, because it happened the night before, and I said, that you weren't mad at me when that happened, were you? And he said, no. He knew that he was taking his frustrations out on me, and I had had enough of that, so I decided to leave. And once I left, the allergy went away.
Wow.
So he can deal with our health, not only to heal us, but he can cause illnesses for us for a certain purpose. That was the catalyst to my NDE, and it was a catalyst to get me out of there. Now I'm still friends with him too, but in a much different way. I keep him at a distance. And my life has been better in every way after I left there. Now, granted, I still am careful about it, perfumes and stuff, but they don't bother me like they used to. Somebody'd walk by me and I couldn't breathe. I had to grab an inhaler. So yes, he can plan divorces and stuff to motivate us to get out of a job or motivate us to move on in our life. It doesn't have to be a marriage situation. It can be for any time frames. So yeah, there was a lot of moments there that he showed me that I share in my book. And it's funny that you said that, because Denise, because there was another person also that said, she said, I couldn't put it down. She said, finally I saved 20 pages for the next day just because I didn't want to finish reading it yet. She said, I wanted to read more.
Oh, that's a good review. That you need to quote that. Yeah, exactly. Wow, yeah. Janet, your experience has been so in-depth and so interesting. I'd love to open up for questions. I actually have a question before we do that, which is, you refer quite a lot. Your experience was obviously a Christian near-death experience type of journey that you've been on. What were your spiritual beliefs when you were younger? Were you raised in this Christian environment, or did one of your spiritual experiences trigger that? Or what's your spiritual journey throughout your life?
My mom and dad were Lutheran. They went to church, and they took us to church when we were little. But kids don't want to go sit on those hard wooden pews and be quiet and not have anything to do for the turn, and the sermon doesn't mean anything to a child, really. So my brothers and I whined enough that they finally left us home so we could play outside. I wanted to play in, climbing the trees or something versus going to church. That was my way, I guess you could say, of communion. But I never thought about it because I was too young to be concerned about it and hadn't put things together yet. Plus, then I shelved when I was 15 years old, the music ukulele. I shelved that. And then I didn't go to church. It wasn't a priority to me. I mean, I would have liked to, but it wasn't that much of a priority for me to go. I knew something. To be honest with you, I kind of figured there was a higher power, but I never thought about it and didn't think about Jesus or universal consciousness. It was the car accident where the spiritual being saved me that started it. And then after that, I just felt a calling to go back to church. I don't know why. Probably because of the arms that saved me. Then I started going to church. But then after Gavin and I got married and moved out to the country, then the churches we enjoyed, because there's churches you can go and it's a sermon. There's churches you can go to and it's a motivational speech associated to life. And I enjoyed those kinds. And they were too far away. cities away from where we were at the ranch. So we stayed home until that miracle crusade to meet his cousin. And then after the third NDE, I knew things were something was going on. I didn't necessarily go back to church immediately after I moved away, because I was then living in Boise, because I moved to Boise after that, after my second husband and I separated, because I didn't want to be close to him, because he was verbally verbally abusive, I guess you could say. So I wanted to be states away, not towns away. And so yes, that's what I did. So yes, so now I go to church. I enjoy the people. Well, I can't now, but while I was taking care of my mom and dad, I would watch Joe Osteen on TV with them, and it's amazing to watch a dying process, I must say. And so I'm excited for your Death Cafe.
Yeah, coming up next if anybody's interested.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions? Yep, Adele, you may be on mute. No, you're off. Okay, Adele, go for it.
Yeah, I'll have a question. I myself experienced 3 NDEs throughout my journey of having epilepsy for 23 years. So epilepsy seizures. So especially when I had my experience when I was 15 of drowning and having an NDE and all, I personally, maybe mentally, physically, I've had this kind of like phobia of swimming, of diving, of anything related to the experience. However, fast forward, I had my left temporal lobectomy brain surgery 7 years ago, and I've been seizure-free since. Little did I know, though, that a lot of my memory would come back. And I mean memory. Now, with what you shared today about your life, you know, being able to see past and future experiences, and that, out of the 3 NDEs that I've had, I really only clear enough remember one of them. And one of them was with someone that I knew that was pushing me back. It was a very bright experience, but I've still, over the time, at first I was just a teenager, life goes on, I'm alive, I don't want to think about it type subject. But especially since my brain surgery, I've kind of felt more, I don't know, pulled to actually find out, discover myself more. Yeah, I think, and so therefore I've just kind of been just pondering about who was that person. Yeah, I could feel that it was someone that I know, but it's only just, I'm just kind of trying to figure out, it's like piece by piece, you're trying to figure out your experience. A bit like what you described, it was a very bright white experience, and it was like I had, I don't know, 3D eyes all around me. I could kind of see what was behind me, but
yeah.
But anyway, it's just, I'm still discovering. I have a feeling that I know who that person was. And I'll be honest and say, I have a feeling that it was my son that was born 8 years ago. I was only 15 then, so kids was not even, in my equation back then. But definitely, I'll just say that it's like my mind has opened up more. I guess my overall question, though, is can you start to find out more throughout, as time goes by? Do you have more deja vu experiences where things make sense as to what you experience? I hope
Yes.
it makes sense to you.
Yes, it takes. Have you ever read PMH Atwater's books?
No.
Okay. Try her, PMH Atwater, and she has studied the near-death experience for 30 some years. She had near-death experiences herself, and she was told to write these books. And she said it takes an average of 7 to 10 years to even start to understand, and over a lifetime it's 25. Now, I didn't understand all this stuff until, over 25 years later. I mean, I understood some of it, but not the full scope of it. Only when I started writing. If you write down these experiences and you see what they are. I mean, if I ever saw the man that caused my car accident, I would thank him. Oh, I wouldn't have done that before, but I would thank him because he has created a wonderful journey for me. And without that having happened, I wouldn't be here. But yes, it takes 25 years. Start reading read everything that you can about near-death experiences, and all this stuff will start falling into place. And write about it. Write about it.
Just an additional question to that. I guess one question I've been asking myself is, will I ever be able to overcome this fear of swimming? And I know this is just a personal question, fear of anything really, because part of it is due to still having ongoing seizures. I don't know if you've heard of SUDEP, where there are many people that have actually died during seizures, died, not come back. But I do reflect on it as, well, there's a reason why I've come back, just like yourself. And so in ways it did cause a lot of fear of having my next seizure and my next one and so on. But now that I've been seizure free for 7 years, I've had more time to actually focus on who I am because of it, rather than worrying when the next seizure will come. For now, anyway. Yeah. So.
And are you near the ocean then?
Oh, well, yes.
Everything's ocean in New Zealand.
Yes, everything. Yes.
Yes, that's what I thought. Well, I wasn't sure if she was, because I'm not in New Zealand, so I wasn't sure if that's where she was. But I cannot answer that because I have a fear of sharks. I grew up in Iowa, which is in the middle of the United States, and I never lived on the ocean. And I always fear getting in the water because of sharks. And I'm talking about, I fear even getting in a lake, even though I know the lake doesn't have sharks because it's in the middle of America. So there are people, though, there are good researchers that if you can find the right one, can take you back and let you find out why that is and take care of it. I've even thought about that for mine. I think mine was past life, to be honest with you. I think I died by a shark attack in a previous life, because when I was in 2nd grade, they let us draw pictures, and I drew a picture of a sandy beach with a pelican on the sand with a fish in its mouth and a grass hutch and blue waters. And so maybe that was where I was attacked by the shark, and that was my spirit leaving. Always remembers that memory. But that's the only thing I can associate it with, because you don't see those kind of things in the middle of a cornfield in Iowa. So
thank you. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Great question there, Adele. I think that's really, really interesting. Love to hear how your journey goes as well with that. Does anyone else have a question that they'd like to ask? Yep, Chitoko? Oh, you might be on mute. Yes, you are. I'll take you off. I can't. Can you just?
Yeah, sure.
Yep, there we go.
Thank you very much for sharing the great story for the 3 times near-death experience.
I can't hear you.
I cannot hear you.
We can hear you. You're quite quiet.
All right.
Can you hear you? Now I can hear you.
Thank you very much for sharing your great experience for the 3-time near-death experience. I'd like to ask the 1 or 2 questions. Did you miss the feelings that you filled with unconditional love, because you had experienced the unconditional love or fulfilled feelings when you were away from your body? But then after I didn't have the exact the near-death experience, but I had a different version of the spiritual emergency, which gives me the different feelings filled with love. But after I finish, or after I return back to the normal routine, sometimes I cannot feel being connected with the loved feelings or unconditional feelings. So then now I'm trying to find out how to connect myself with the vibration. Or so then if you have a special way to reconnect with you.
I do have a song. Somewhere in Time. There is a song called, well, it's a movie actually, Somewhere in Time, where this guy falls in love and goes back, they communicate over time. But the music is so fantastic. If you Google on YouTube Somewhere in Time.
Somewhere in Time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not actually YouTube. Mm-hmm. Somewhere in Time, and find that song. If you had headphones on, and then you meditate to that song, you, for me, I can connect again, because then I release everything, and then there's a crescendo in there where you can just feel yourself, going back up to heaven. You feel that again. It's quite an amazing song for me. Some people connect to drums. Some people connect to tones. So it's just finding the right one for you. But try my song. I think it's awesome.
Somewhere in Time on the
Somewhere in Time.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Brilliant.
I didn't so much have a question as a comment. I thought it was quite beautiful the way you described the idea that God lives within us as us. I thought that was quite beautiful the way you described that.
Well, if you think about it, if you think about people that have difficulties in life, and you want to do something, you think, I can't do that. Well, just think about who's inside you. You can do anything if you put your foot forward and try and manifest those things with God's in you, and you can do anything. Maybe sometimes you don't get what you want because that's not what He has planned for you. But we set up our own blockages? We say we can't do that, or that's too hard, rather than saying I can, I will. We need to change our manifesting messages to positive.
Definitely. Any other questions for Janet? No? This has been wonderful, Janet. Oh, sorry, Adele.
Sorry, I thought I was asking too much questions.
No, there's not too much.
I just want to add that since my brain surgery, how can I say this? My father, he experienced an NDE. He had a heart attack. Dad shared this with me when I was young, and I was naive and ignored him. But anyway, he had an NDE, and his mother, my grandmother, told him that it wasn't his time, that he still needed to go down and look after his kids. And it was very interesting experience. But Dad had a second heart attack and actually went. And since I had my brain surgery, there's been a few serious times, and I mean serious times where very sensitive times where my father has come to visit me to tell me that he wants me to look after his grandchild. And he sounds the same as he was when he was alive. I am sensitive about these experiences, so I just thought it was other things, other world experiences, but it's like he hasn't changed. Anyway, my question is, even though I didn't die when he visited, is that common for people who have passed on to?
Yes, because that's what they call an after effect. People that have near-death experiences have after effects, and some of them become instantaneous mediums or healers, like Benny Hinn and other people. After my NDE, I saw cats, and I've since become a medium. have not practiced my mediumship in a few years because my focus was the book. I just actually signed up to see if I can do forensic mediumship. So we'll see how that goes. But yes, to answer your question, yes. Yeah, this is, and you can learn about this gift when you feel up to it. You can connect with a medium for classes, and you'll understand all this stuff. Is it bothersome for you?
No, and to be honest, it's the opposite of it's comforting for me.
Yeah.
My dad visited me a week after he died. So it just gave me reassurance that he's still around. And it's normally been times, not like every day, well, maybe I'm not listening, but anyway, it's normally during times when, you know, I'm going through my hard times and parents are checking up on you. I just kind of feel like he's watching over me for something, and also my son, his grandson, and yeah, it's been kind of like a spiritual parent experience.
People don't realize, even without NDEs, people don't realize they can talk to their passed over loved ones all the time. And they do, but they just discount it, thinking it's their own memories, their own thoughts, their own wishes, but it's actually the spirits communicating with them. You can communicate with lost loved ones, angels, spirit guides. Who cares who it is if it's comforting? Because the spirit will only give you good things. I mean, you got to consider the ego. The ego is the opposite half of the spirit that wants all the stuff that it wants right now and is impatient. So that's where you have to learn to weigh: is this my ego wanting this beautiful new car, or is it my spirit that says you can't afford that right now? So that's where you have to learn to listen. But yes, you talk to them all the time.
Thank you.
Oh, when is the next book coming out? I don't know yet. I'm working on it.
Are you working on it? You started?
Yes, I have a second book that's going to be of other NDE stories. So if you ever come across anybody that wants to share their story, I found that it is healing to share your NDE story. Not everybody wants to write a book, but they feel like they should share their story to help the world. And with my book, I'm helping people do that.
Wonderful. That's brilliant. Yeah, I've definitely found that as well with the podcast that I run, Let's Talk Near Death. That has been such a healing journey, and I really freaked out when I heard that I should do that. It wasn't on my radar, wasn't something I wanted to do, and yet I look at the healing through me as well, me sharing my story, other people sharing their stories, how the stories have helped other people to heal. It's beautiful, Janet. Totally support you, totally encourage you.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's wonderful. Okay, last chance. Any other questions before we wrap up? No? This has been wonderful, Janet. There was something you said, just looking at my notes here. You talked right at the beginning about how you always knew you were going to die young. And I love this because I also had this. I always knew as a kid, as a young child, that something was going to happen. Something very, very drastic. I didn't know that I'd die. I didn't know that I'd have an NDE. But I always knew that it was there, that something really big, a really big life event would happen to me personally, and it would change everything for me, my family, my future going forward. So I love that you have that connection. I love that you talked about that as well.
Our soul knows.
I think they do. Yes, totally. So I have really enjoyed chatting to you. Thank you for coming in. Thank you for your time, your knowledge, your story, everything. And I'm sure we all agree that this has been wonderful. So we can just give Janet a bit of a round of applause. We've got the clapping function on Zoom as well there that we can clap for her.
Thank you. It's fun. This is my favorite topic. So yes.
Yeah, exactly. We could talk all day, all week.
Yeah. Definitely.
Exactly.
What, somebody wants to talk about death? What?
Exactly. So thank you so much from the IANDS Auckland group. We're a new group. We're an online group, and you are very welcome to join us. And anybody who's watching this, maybe the rerun of this, the recording afterwards, very welcome to join us. And Janet, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Bye, everybody.